If you wanted to emulate a PC back in the old days, you had a number of options. You can see PC Task, and if you run PC Task with a modern PPC emulated setup, finally we get to experience that thing running at full speed, something that we definitely didn't get back in the day. PC Task is very good for running DOS applications, and also it runs Windows as well. This is the actual Windows that I had running when I was at Blackburn iTech all the way back in 1995, and I copied that onto disks before I left Blackburn iTech. This background you can see was created using the After Dark screensaver software, After Dark 2.0 Star Trek edition, and you can see I've clip arted that and made that picture in the background that I got from that machine. And the layout of my iTech computer, you can see all the icons. I'm not sure what GWS is, but of course didnt Enhanced was on the PC, and I used custom icons. Banner Mania was a DOS application for printing out banners, and you can see the very rare Star Trek edition of After Dark icons on the bottom, which I could not find on the internet. And PageMaker 4 is what I used to use. So this iTech computer is very basic, and I had to copy this onto high density floppies before I left. And so let's just check out this PC Tools. I've no idea what that is, but you can see it is possible now finally to run Windows on PC Task, but unfortunately PC Task is no good for running games, or at least not that I could find. Maybe Windows games, but if you want to use DOS games, now we have another alternative. If we now switch to the RTG setup, PPC RTG, using the built-in graphics driver, the Zorro 3 you can see this is the one that we showed before playing the RTG games. This is my emulators. You can see PC Task there, but we've also got Dosbox RTG. So there's the config file. If you want to edit that, I'll be running through that a bit later on. So when I try to run this, it complains and resets my machine, but it isn't reset. What's actually going on is it's running in the background, and it's simply prioritised my workbench screen. So here it is. I've mounted C up as Dosbox virtual drive on my PC. So if we now go to that, it's got all of the PC games in there, but unfortunately they've all got large file names which I can't access on this DOS. So what I've actually done is rename some of those, just like Commander Keen. I've renamed that CC1, and if we try to run that, hopefully we can run Commander Keen on this machine. Unfortunately, when I ripped all these games, I forgot to click on the audio, so none of the music unfortunately is playing in the background. You can see this was ID software, capital I, capital D, huge I in fact, as in I, not as in I, as in id. But anyway, this is the first time I've played Commander Keen by id software, and I've no idea what I'm doing. I'm playing this on the keyboard. You can see it's playing fairly quickly at the moment, fairly smoothly, or at least as good as a 286 will play this on a native PC. So what you'll find running Dosbox is anything which was released at least before 1990 plays full speed, and any 286 games should be absolutely fine. So this being a 286 game, you can see I've managed to work out some of the keys. I'm trying to work out how to jump at the moment, which isn't particularly easy. It's got to be one of the keys on the keyboard. Let's keep pressing them and find out. With this setup, PPC and RTG, you can see id in the corner, flashing capital I, capital D, and you can see that we're running VGA or maybe even EGA on this screen. You can see it's bigger than the normal Amiga screen, and because it's a PC, I'm not quite sure if this aspect ratio is correct. Maybe it is, but the squares seem square, so maybe this is the full screen aspect ratio that we could have got on some Amiga games. And certainly Super Frog and ATR definitely pushed this screen ratio using overscan to the maximum. We've figured out how to fire the weapon, and unfortunately that's taken us all the way back to the start. So let's check out another game. This is Arcon. This is definitely 1984. So there aren't that many early DOS games that you really want to play on Dosbox. You can see it's playing this one full speed with our PPC, and some of these will play and some of these won't. So this being an early CGA game, CGA, you can actually alter the preferences of Dosbox so that it runs in CGA, but if I press F1 here the machine's going to crash. So let's move on to something else. Let's check out Lotus. So if you wanted to play Lotus 3.1 or whatever it is on the PC with a purple Lotus, which wasn't actually released in real life, they were all red and yellow and white, but apart from that you can see the squashed Sega Mega Drive graphics have been squashed onto the PC and it's slightly wider, and you can also see that there are some frame rates available out of this engine. This is running with the out-of-the-box configuration of cycles per second, and you can change that as well. You can also change the screen frame skipping so that it skips a number of frames, and I think this is on frame skip 4 at the moment, so it's only drawing 1 in 4 frames, and you can obviously double that if you want it to run a bit quicker, but that sacrifices the smoothness. If you knock that down to 2, then it should be a bit smoother, and maybe if you can alter the cycles, maybe you can get certain games running on this emulator. So this is Dosbox 0.7. That's Lotus 3 released in 1993, so anything pre-93 is usually good and it usually runs out of the box. Let's check out something else. Highway. I've never heard of Highway before, and when I tried to run this game on practice mode and before I started the camera, it didn't flicker the workbench in the background like you can see at the moment, which is highly annoying. It just played the game absolutely fine with the music and all the graphics and everything else. So of course now that I'm recording it's coming up with glitches. So this is an early 90s game. Let's check this out. I think it said 94, I'm not quite sure. I think this was a magazine cover disc release. So Highway, High Octane, I've no idea, but you can see it's an LED Storm kind of a clone. And you can see that this game fires with the fire button. You can destroy things, blow things up, and also you get attacked later on with, look at that, even clouds in the way. Let's collect our first power up, and that gives us more speed, and you can also see different ones. I think that's a shield or something like that, and maybe that gives us some more energy, or a flashing shield. And so this is a great powered up overhead shooter that we never got on the Amiga, and it's quite fun, but you can see I've already destroyed that life. So let's move on to something else that we never got on the Amiga. Sadly, this is Pinball Dreams 2. I have managed to record some sound, but it's a bit juddery and laggy, and you can alter those sound buffer settings so it doesn't do that, and you can reduce the sound quality or even switch it off. But for this one you can see Pinball Dreams 2 is one that we could have got and should have got and must have got on the Amiga. They didn't bother, so we didn't get any of these tables. It's quite difficult. This is the very first time I've seen this game ever. You can see running this in VGA mode, which runs quite slowly, and this being a mid-90s game, it does run a lot more slowly than those early 90s games. But you can see it's not impossible to play this. It does work, but it hasn't got most of the sound effects from the Amiga version, probably not emulated, and I can't remember what sound card I'm actually emulating on this setup, but you can see Pinball Dreams 2 is something that they could have and should have ported to the Amiga, because it's simply Pinball Dreams 1 with different tables, and it wouldn't have taken any effort at all to copy these over. Nobody's bothered, and it's a shame because we've got loads of inferior pinball games and nothing which could actually rival the playability of Pinball Dreams and Pinball Fantasies. This is laggy, and this is also trying to configure this with the cycles as well, and the CPU on my PC didn't even get over 14% when trying to emulate this game, but it was still struggling even with cycles on max. So max cycles, and you can even adjust the frame skip in the game. Unfortunately it's F12 to do that, and because I've got an Amiga 1200 keyboard it only goes up to F10, so I can't actually press F12, and so this Amiga Dosbox suffers from the fact that you can't actually tweak it on a real Amiga keyboard. Let's move on to the next one. This is some kind of Robot Wars kind of game, Revenge of the Robot Warrior. And so the stuttering of the screen, if I reduce the frames to frame skip 2, it means it's very slow, but it is very smooth, and I have had this game running in the practice go quite a lot smoother than this, and again if you switch off the music it might free up some cycles. But despite all that, the Amiga emulator has been pushed to the max, but my actual PC is barely scratched trying to run this game. Moving on from Pinball Dreams 2, there was also Pinball Fantasies 2 that we never got, and I haven't actually loaded that up to check, but I presume that's a completely different game again that we never got, and that was entirely possible. Move back in time again. This is Gods, and a short file name to enter, and it's not hard to rename that path. Gods, let's begin that quest. I don't think it enters with the title theme from the Amiga, but what we do have is a nice big screen that we never got on the Amiga. Nice full scale, full screen square graphics, and a nice colourful VGA colour scheme. And again, I'm not sure if the sound effects are actually emulated. I didn't actually record any, of course, but you can see the game experience runs actually slightly marginally quicker than the Amiga version, even though running this emulated on an Amiga emulator on Dosbox on a PC. So it is capable on some of these games to play them slightly, and I do mean slightly marginally quicker. The scrolling is definitely slower than the Amiga version. When the action gets packed it's slower, but you can see that this is definitely playable. Gods, thank you for playing Gods, see you soon. And so let's really push the frontiers now, let's really shove it into the muck, let's test this thing out, because it's alright playing a CGA game like Alicat and having a good time, but what about a 386 game? Yes, this PC task could only emulate a 286, this DOSBox can actually emulate a 386 Super VGA. So let's try that thing out. Let's try Lynx 386 now, and this is one of the earliest Super VGA games in glorious 256 colours, and you can see again a massive screen size, so we're really taking advantage now of that RTG setup. And again, I haven't played this in years and years. I think I only played it once, even back in the day. So Lynx 386 is one of those games ahead of its time, and it was ported using ham mode onto the Amiga, or maybe even was created on the Amiga and ported to the PC. But you can see on this version we've got clouds, we've got also a nice grass formation on high res mode on the floor. We've also got digitized trees, digitized palm trees, digitized markers on the floor, a nice golf cart, and digitized palm trees. Absolutely lovely. So once this finally draws, and this is drawing about the same speed as World Class Leaderboard on the Commodore 64, which everybody used to have to sit there and wait patiently for it to draw. This is drawing in a marvellous 256 colours at least, in a nice massive full screen on a PC. This does play with the voice speech sampled sound effects and the bird noises and the wind blowing and the waves on the beach. Unfortunately, those didn't record on this particular rip, even though it was playing those when I played this at the time. So here we are now at Mauna Kea, or whatever it is, Mauna Kea, and you can see a wonderful draw distance, as we can see all that vegetation piled up, lovely shadows everywhere, undulation of the vegetation, and also those pits of sand you can see. So let's try it again, and I don't actually know how to turn the view around, and we don't seem to be doing too badly in this case. You can see drawing this on a 386 actually draws the landscape fairly quickly, and unfortunately it doesn't cache the images into RAM because they're all different. So it's got there, and if you can hardly see something and you're just looking at grass, then obviously that will draw a bit quicker. Actually trying to play this game, you'll find the mouse on some of these games is the laggiest part, and that's quite difficult. But you can see we've managed to hit the ball. Maybe we're playing this on novice mode because I don't think that was a particularly good shot, but we managed to hit it, and that means it's somewhere near that green. And this reminds me of taking a holiday in somewhere nice for a change, instead of hanging around in the town where I was born. So let's try again, and I'm actually very impressed with the VGA, Super VGA resolution of this game. I'm impressed with Dosbox for managing to run it at anywhere near playable speed, which it does, and unfortunately this thing crashed after a number of holes, and I think if you try and hit the ball off course it will draw some weird things and then crash. But it is possible, and the fact that it is possible to draw this full screen RTG PPC on our Amiga means that it would have been possible to port this lock, stock and barrel to the Amiga with a simple PC emulator to emulate this kind of stuff, emulate a graphics card, emulate a PC. It would actually have been possible, and if you have maybe a vampire or something like that, it would be possible. So this really opens up the door to slow PC games. There are quite a few slow strategy games out there which are good and are playable on Dosbox, so you can actually play the games that we never actually got back in the day. And that game reminds me of the golf game on the Philips CDI, and I was actually at iTech, I was actually given the job, or offered the job, of being the official Philips CDI player tester, and I could have been in there as the official guy, but I turned it down obviously because it was the Philips CDI, So I could have been in there, I could have been in. That could have been hitting the big time. But unfortunately, I turned it down because I said, have you seen the CDI? It's terrible. And so let's get back to another game that we never got on the Amiga, slightly more difficult because of the high resolution, but not impossible. This is Settlers 2, and the big problem about this game is the scrolling is very, very jerky indeed, and you'll probably have to get the custom frames all the way up there to get this running smoothly, but it is possible. See, everything in the game is running. In fact, I think it's trying to play the music at the same time as well, which isn't recorded. And those glorious graphics, you can see the wind blowing everything around, nice high resolution tiles in the corners, and everything works obviously from the original game. So Settlers 2 works. Let's move on again, and perhaps it's just as well that it didn't record the audio. This is X-Wing, released by LucasArts in 1993, so again, anything before 93 will just about work on this thing, and then maybe at least after 94 and 95 the PC games start to require some more horsepower, and that means you can't play them. But any Amiga version which was released on the PC, you can play it just about. And so this is the very first time I've seen X-Wing in action. This is one of the games that I saw running at iTech whilst I was there, along with Civilization. You can run that at full speed, absolutely. So we have got Civ AG as well that you can use on the Amiga. So X-Wing, trying to push this thing to its limits, but I'm not quite managing it because I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing on this thing. So let's just cut out some of this footage and get on with it. Let's enter that spaceport, and the loading is instantaneous with this thing, and everything moves very, very quickly indeed, so that bodes well for the game. New tour, maybe that's it, I've no idea. Let's click on that. New tour, tour 1, tour 2, tour 3. Well, I've no idea. Again, I've no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. Let's just click on the door. Enter Tour of Duty. So it's a long convoluted thing to get there, and then we have to sit through a long convoluted thing again. So let's just get on with it. And so we find ourselves in the map room. It's saying that we are Red, it's you, and you are supposed to take on these guys and guard military equipment and protect military rendezvous attack from Imperial fighters. So that's what we're supposed to do. No idea whether that's anything interesting or not. Let's just click on that door and get out of here. I think that's what we're supposed to do. Let's just enter the mission. And so you can see Dosbox, if you have a PPC emulated setup or a Vampire, is good. If you have an all-60, then it will play many 2x6 games, many CGA, EGA games, and some pretty simple VGA ones as well. And I'm pretty sure Commander Keen will work on there if you have an all-60 card on your Amiga. That then unlocks the myriad of PC games that we never got, simply unlocks them to be played on the Amiga. So this is Star Wars. So that gets around any copyright issues. Nobody's going to copyright that rendition of that theme tune. And it's marginally playable. I won't say it's as good as a proper conversion to the Amiga, which we got looking at the other RTG games, but when there's nothing happening on the screen, it's fairly fluid, and even though it's jerking away here, it's fairly playable. It's not impossible, which I would have thought was the case using this setup, emulating an emulator on a PC. It would necessarily be jerky, and again this isn't even scratching my PC CPU. This isn't even filling up one of the CPU cores that I've got running on this PC, and so none of the other cores are being stretched by this emulation, but it's simply the software being slowed down trying to emulate these cycles. So thank you for viewing this PC RTG guide on the Dosbox setup.